Lizzie's Workshop in this episode of Mixed Media Monday. Today I am bringing you a double spread journal page, an art journal page, that was inspired by the challenges that are going on for Flippin' Fabulous Challenge. It's on both Facebook and I get the messages in my inbox, in my mailbox. This challenge is put on by Sue Wojcicki, and she is at, I'll put the link to her web page down below, and it is www.irreversiblemoi.com. So what I've got here is just one of those pages where I've created this gigantic mess. I was actually creating book pages, and what I've done is gone through and used the spread in my journal as the page that I was catching all the overspray. So I was making this Christmassy kind of journal, so it's got a bunch of yellows and a bunch of blues and a bunch of greens and reds and golds and all that kind of stuff in there, plus a whole lot of different piles of gesso and layers of things. So what I did is I grabbed onto the first challenge and the second challenge, and this started in May. This is from May 3rd to 9th. And I took those two and combined them into this one. And those two challenges were for using calendar or the passage of time, and to use feet in any way you wanted to use them in. So what I've done with this spread is I put my journal on the floor and I walked across it basically, and I traced my footprints onto these pages. So what I'm trying to do now is I've got so many different layers on there that I'm trying to put another layer on there to seal in the ones below and to create a more slick surface for me to work with on my what is now my top layer. And all I'm doing is doing that with gesso. So after I've created this layer of gesso, I'm going to move on and I'm going to go over it with some paint, and the paint color that I chose was just the acrylic titanium buff. So I'm going to use the magic of media, and I'm going to skip past, because you basically get the point of what I'm going to be doing here. And magically all of the footprints are painted in with gesso. So I saved you a little bit of video watching time with that. So now that it's covered in gesso, it'll be a little bit easier for the titanium buff to stay on there. And this is the reason that I used this paint specifically is because it's in this little container, and it's got a little bit of a shimmer to it because I don't know what was in my mixture, so this is just kind of the using up of something else that I mixed into a little Tupperware container, and I didn't want to waste it, so here it is. I'm using it on this project. And I suspect that it does have a little bit of, it is smooth, so I think it's just like an iridescent kind of medium in it to make the titanium buff a little bit more shiny. But otherwise, I'm not sure what else it's mixed with. So I'm going to use my magic of media once again, I think. And oh, look, they're all painted. That was quick, hey? I just, closed my eyes and wiggled my nose, and it was done. So what I've done here is I've grabbed onto this old-fashioned calendar, and it's not really that old-fashioned. It's actually from about 1986. But it was done in a 1950s kind of style. And so what I'm doing is I'm taking that vintage-looking paper and I am adding it to this page as kind of the passage of time and stuff like that. And I probably could have added the paper first, but I had traced my footprints first and didn't want to have to step on the book again. So basically I just kind of ran with what was happening on the page. So once I rip up these two calendar pages, or maybe it's 3 calendar pages, and decide where they're going and how they're going on, I'm going to start gluing them on. And I'm using just the golden matte medium to glue them on, and the reason that I'm layering like this is because there's the paper underneath, the background underneath is so incredibly covered and layered with different layers that if I don't cover it up and seal it all in, then all those layers are just going to chip away because there's no more structural integrity to them. I probably shouldn't have used this page, but because it's just a art journal page, I didn't really worry about it. It's not like I'm I'm trying to preserve any memories for posterity or anything with this project. This is just a fun, get your groove back, continue creating kind of project for me anyways. So for the most part, I'm going to just glue them all on exactly like that, and I'm sealing them in on top too with the matte gel. In this project, I'm not planning to spray anything or anything like that, so sealing them in actually works out pretty well in my favor. Once I am done gluing these all on, I'm going to glue on my next layer. And my next layer is something that I love, and it is the floral tissue paper from the dollar store again. I think I've showed it to you in a couple of my videos and mentioned that it was my favorite, so shouldn't be any surprises there that I'm going to use it on this project as well. And like I said, I could have left everything and just kind of covered it in a coat of matte gel, but I kind of had this feeling that I needed to seal it all in and put another layer over the whole thing. So when I chose to use the tissue paper, it gives it a little bit of pop of color, but at the same time it still does give it that semi-transparent kind of look to it, so some of those colors will still come through. And then if you saw at the top left there, I put on a piece of washi tape, and I really wanted that washi tape to do a good job, but the problem is that, once again, I was having trouble with it adhering because the stuff underneath wasn't tight down enough. So I'm basically covering the entire surface of whatever's left with this tissue paper, and that will allow everything to stay put the way that I want it to. Once I was done with this page, I kind of felt like there was a little bit too much monotony in color, but because it was for a challenge and I had already signed it, I didn't bother with altering it or changing it or adding to it at that point. I kind of find that when I create a page, I really have to sign it off that day that I feel that it's finished, and the reason that I have to do that is because if I feel that it's finished on that day, then it speaks to what my mood was, and it speaks to the state of mind that I was in. And if something is signed off, I will almost never, ever go back and readjust that project. I think in all of my art journals and all of my projects that I have gone back to one art journal page and redone it, or not redone it, but added to it. And that was because I had signed it off as a thinking that the background was finished, and I wanted to leave it just like that. But when I was flipping through my journal and saw it, I was instantly inspired to create something else with that page, and that's what I ended up doing. So as you can see here, I'm just covering all that space with that tissue paper, and although it is adding another layer with all the different flowers that are on there, it's also allowing a little bit of transparency through from the bottom, but it's also giving a little bit of like a gessoed effect, as if I had gone through and braided a layer of gesso over top of the project. So it just gives this whole new dynamic to the double page spread. Now this is a very big page as well. Normally I would only work on one side of this journal, and this is a really big journal as it is anyways, and to double that was a real effort to try and think of how to fill the page and not overwhelm the page, because when I tend to go to larger, when I tend to work large, I tend to try to fill as many little things in as I can rather than filling it with large items. So I think that this was kind of a challenge for me to do the big spread, and just layer and layer until all the space is filled up. I don't know if you can hear my puppy's chain in the background, but her collar, she's running around my office kind of lost, because I usually don't close the door and lock her in here, but there's nobody else at home, and she's been climbing onto the dining room table and munching down on anything she can find up there. So when you have children, things are often left around the house that you don't expect, and she is often into getting herself into trouble. So I've locked her in the room, and she's picking on my old dog, and she's adventuring through every little corner. So if you hear her scavenging, sorry about that. So yeah, once I'm done covering this page in tissue paper, I look at it and I stared at it for a little while, and I really had to think about what I wanted to do next, because I didn't want to cover up the footsteps. I didn't know what I was going to say about the footprints or the feet or whatever, and I couldn't decide if they were feet or if they were footprints or anything like that. So this is one of those projects where I kind of take it to a certain point and then I just stare at it for a while, or I walk away from it for a while and I let it decide in its own time what it wants from me. So this was one of those things where I just kind of left it as is, and then I went to bed. And the next morning I started up again and continued where I'd left off and added more to it. So you will see the skip in time quite easily, and so now that it's dry, I'm adding a bunch of washi tape layers to it. This washi tape, I believe, is music notes or maybe bird cages. Either way, I suspect that it's either a Recollections or a Tim Holtz kind of tape, and especially because it's a tissue tape rather than a washi tape, I would think that it is like a Tim Holtz kind of thing. Oh, it's music notes, yeah. So that would be like the Tim Holtz kind of roll that you would get at Michael's. So I've added a whole bunch of patterns, and basically the effect that I'm trying to get right now is to have everything really busy sinking into the background, and then to bring the footprints or the feet up to the top layer of the page so that everything looks like it's kind of floating on or walking over the earth. You know, life is really complex. Let's make the background really complex. And I kind of had a direction for where I was going with this at this point. And because this was posted between May 3rd and May 9th for the challenges, I created this page on the Mother's Day weekend. And so I was thinking about mothers, and I was thinking about my daughter and all that stuff. So as the weekend went on, I thought a little bit more and a little bit more. And I was thinking that if, you know, in my footsteps, in my life, there are so many women that come together to have created me or to influence my life, that I kind of wanted to do a bit of honor to those women. And so part of the things that they do for me is through learning. Part of the things that they do for me is through you know, helping me out or guiding me and all that kind of stuff. So the next layer that I added on here was the letters, and this stencil is from Stencil Girl. I think this is one of Mary Beth's stencils, and I love this stencil. I've used it with all of my different mediums, and I have used it on all kinds of different projects. My favorite thing to do with this specific stencil is to use it on my mono printing or jelly printing plates. And I say jelly printing plates because I really do use the Jelly Arts jelly plates. I don't make my own anymore. I've had enough of that. It's so much easier to buy the jelly plates from Jelly Arts and have them last for a long time and do what you want to do and stuff like that. So once I'm done adding this all on, I let it sit for a while. I did have an idea of where I wanted to take it, but I had to just go and do the stuff that I was obligated to do for Mother's Day. So I just kind of let it sit for a while and let that dry. And then after that, I went and... So once I'm done with all of this texture paste, and I think that that's just the Liquitex flexible texture paste, I have a big jug of it, and I'm trying to get rid of it because it's starting to dry out. And it's a little bit less flexible than I'm liking it to be. So I used it in here, and I've used it in a whole bunch of other projects trying to just get it out of my stock. So once this is done, I'm going to reach for my Tim Holtz Distress ink. And the color that I'm probably going to reach for, I think that is Crushed Walnut. Oh, is it Crushed Walnut? Is that what it's called? No. It's the dark brown. So I'm going to just rough up the pages on the outside of the page to kind of give an overall border to the page. And I'm just using my Tim Holtz Distress tool as well. And then I'm going to run that over the letters to darken the letters up so that they pop a little bit more off of the page. And also so that they blend in with the calendar pages that are already in the background of this page. I like that antique kind of brown of it. Oh, it's walnut stain. There we go. So walnut stain around the edges to create a border, and then adding in the, going over the letters to give them a little bit more definition. There we go. The next thing I'm going to do is grab my pens, my Pitt pens and such, and I'm going to go around the outside of those footprints. And now, it was not all the footprints are the perfect shape, and that's because they're my actual footprints, and it's kind of difficult to, you know, step on a book, especially over the one that's over the spine, and to trace your footprints and get all the details and have everything be symmetrical from footprint to footprint. So I kind of just did my best and kind of made it look like my feet were normal. If you know what I mean. Like, I kind of gave them some shape that maybe the paint had obliterated as they went through. And as it happens, it doesn't really matter all that much. The most important part is the graphic that I was going for. So once I've gone around and outlined my footprints, I'm going to go and get some pens so that I can do some Zentangling. And I think that for the whole thing I ended up just using this pen, and it is a oil-based Sharpie paint pen. And it's the fine tip in that. Now I had to ask myself after the whole project was finished, why did I put toenails on a footprint? And to this day I still can't answer that question. I think it was just I was thinking about feet. Instead of footprints, I was thinking about feet. So that works too. So then the next step that I'm doing is I'm creating spaces within each foot. And these have the visual representation of creating pieces of a person or pieces of me. And as I go through, all the different pieces for different people are different shapes. But even though they're different shapes, they all will have similar components. So once I get to Zentangling these shapes, I'm going to use similar patterns on all 3 footprints. And then I will have a saying once I get through Zentangling all of the footprints. So then the next one I'm going to do is going to be a totally different person, so I'm going to use a totally different pattern to create the spaces. And I did this totally on purpose. I wanted it to be so that the components were similar, but that the people were definitely different people. And I didn't really pay attention to whose footprint was going to be whose, but once I write the words on it, it becomes apparent that I did choose at some point to do it that way. I didn't want perfect circles for this. I did want like a circle graphic, but I didn't want perfect circles for this. So what I'm doing is I'm using a stencil that doesn't have perfect circles. Who's the stencil by? I want to say Heidi Swapp, but I don't know for 100% on that. So then I'm just going to pick some patterns out of my mind, and I'm going to fill it all in. And I'm just doing this. I'm doing it with the Faber-Castell Pitt pens, and I'm probably using an F, I think. That's usually the one that my go-to. And I'm just creating the patterns freehand. It's kind of a calming process to create the Zentangly type patterns for this. And that's all I'm going to do. And I didn't know exactly where this was heading, so what I ended up with was using a lot of one pattern on this foot and a lot of one pattern on the other foot. And I just kind of kept going along and seeing where it would take me. This is definitely one of those pages where I don't really have a plan. So because the idea of using the components of the calendar and the feet was not my idea, it was an inspiration from somebody else, I really had to kind of just let it flow out. I really couldn't think about it too much, and I had to just kind of say, okay, feet, well, feet look like this, and okay, calendar, well, I have a calendar. So that's kind of where it took me, and then once I start creating, creating on its own will inspire more creating. So that's how this one ended up. The more you create, the more you're bound to create, basically. And sometimes when I'm doing the Zentangle pattern type things, I get into this rhythm of counting. So, you know, I just kind of go through and off I go. So through the magic of video editing, I took away all the pain of watching the whole thing. And if you look, you'll see that there are a whole bunch of different components and different patterns, but I did take a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and I did put it in every footprint. And because I was thinking about Mother's Day, I entitled this page Mothers and Daughters. And then I wrote out the words, I walk in your footsteps, she will walk in mine, on till the end of time. And it's just a tribute to mothers and daughters who become mothers and daughters who become mothers and have daughters. So that is where this page led. So thank you to Irreversibly Moi for the inspiration for this page. Up comes the stills for this, and I'll show you a close-up of each of the feet and the Zentangling that I did in it. And like I said, I'm signing it off so that I don't have to look at it or change it ever again. I walk in your steps, she'll walk in mine. On to the end of time. Thank you for watching Mixed Media Monday with Lizzie's Workshop.